Hello everybody, 6-Speed Dakota here. Today I got a rather interesting project today. Today we are going to be changing a bicycle tube. It's really simple. My brother needs something to get around with, so we'll just go ahead and change it. So, the only real thing you're going to need, you might need a couple screwdrivers. You're also going to need a new bike patch that I bought at the local bike shop. You're also going to need a new bike patch that fits the correct size, and preferably in a Schrader valve, because we don't usually go by the little skinny little things here in North America. Now, the first step is we got to get the tire off. So the first main thing we got to do is we're going to squeeze the caliper together. It's kind of hard to do with one hand, but we're going to pull this cable out. And it's designed to do this, there we go, so that the caliper spreads apart like that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn the bike upside down. Okay, so now if your tube has a slow leak, let me get my valve core remover, then you might be able to patch these things, but they're so cheap, I mean, you could just replace them. I don't really know about this one. I haven't seen too much about it. I pumped it up and it still seems to have some decent air in it. But anyhow, I use one of these little valve core remover tools, because you're going to have to get the tire out from between those the caliper there. So I'm going to find the valve here and loosen this guy off. Well, now once you get this valve out, it'll drain fairly quickly. There we go. Okay, so now now we got to get the wheel off. If you got one of these guys, you're kind of lucky. If you don't, well, you got to pull off the nut, and it's very simple. All you need is a wrench, but for this guy, just try to use a pair of pliers, since that thing's like really stuck on there. There we go. And then we will rotate this guy slightly to loosen it off. There's a little thumb nut on this side. There we go. And in loosening that off, in this bike, there's a little groove that this thing sits in on either side. So you have to make sure that's past the groove, and then just lift the tire out. Okay, so now we have to get the tire off the wheel. So this is where I recommend having a screwdriver. So, since we don't have to worry about this one too much because the tube's damaged, what you're going to want to do is you want to peel back the wheel here, take your screwdriver, get it under the lip of the tire, sorry, my bad. Oops. And it might take a little bit of persuasion, but once you have it, and you folded it over the wheel like that, you want to do it in a couple more places. This is a bit of a tricky process. Oops. There we go. Okay, so now we got this little lip of the tire over. I can just take my thumb and slide it in here. Oh man, my nice white shirt's all dirty now. Oh well. So, there we go. And now, we're going to try to do, I'll set the camera back down because people seem to complain that the camera's too shaky. It's pretty much the exact same thing on the other side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my screwdriver and go, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm going to go underneath the actual bike tube. Now I'm going to pry, oops. So I'm going to take my screwdriver and I'm going to go in underneath the bike tube itself and underneath the lip of that other wheel, or the other side of the tire. Now you can see how I'm underneath there with my screwdriver. And I'm going to pry down and just keep on repeating that process again. This time, I can use a screwdriver and I can go from the back. So once I get in behind it, I can pry down. Oops. As I kind of move along a little bit. Here's a big pry bar, why not? And you'll feel it once you kind of get to the point where it kind of breaks free. Jesus, this is frustrating. There we go. Once it breaks free, just pull it loose. And then at the very bottom here where the Schrader valve is, just pull that out. You got one wheel, one tire and tube. So now, we pull the tube out. And there's the old one right here. Now, here's the sort of kind of difficult part. Now we got to put this guy back on this. But first, what we want to do is if we look inside there, we see that there's a nice rubber strip. You want to make sure that that's not damaged in any way, shape, or form. That there's no burrs on the valve stem. Just kind of run your finger along. If you feel something sharp, like a rock chip in the side of the wheel, then that's going to have to be filed down or else you rip the new tube. But it doesn't actually appear to be that bad. So, I'll grab the new tube. Okay, so now the next step, we got our new tube. Now, all new tubes come with a new Schrader valve and cap. So take the cap off and save it. If you don't have a bike pump or an air compressor, you're going to have to go to a fuel station or something. Just going to give it that little bit of air. Just to make that a little bit firm like that. It doesn't have to be too hard. See how nice and squishy that is? That actually might even be too much. What you want to do is you want the tube to keep its shape. Now, start by putting it into the hole. Now, some people like to use silicone spray. I don't like it too much because it's kind of expensive. I use some soapy water just in a little spray bottle that I have. Yeah, wet it down liberally with some... Oops, I sprayed the camera. Uh-oh. There we go. So, a little bit of soapy water. Lubrication is good. Same thing with the inside of the tire. So oops, I laid the wheel in the wrong spot. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is peel this off, or just get underneath it and spray the tire liberally. Now, here comes the trickiest part. So, probably can't see what I'm doing right now, but I'm going to sit the bottom of the wheel and the tube into the bottom of the tire like this. Doesn't have to be on straight at all right now. So once I sat that in there, same thing applies. Oops. This is tricky, especially, so what I can do is the same kind of technique where I slide my hand around the tire. What I'm trying to do is basically just stuff the tube inside there for right now. Now it does look kind of funky, but this tube, and small, but this tube will expand when I put air in it. The reason they stopped using tube tires in cars is because they didn't balance very well, is one of the reasons. Okay, so notice the valve sticking through, but my tire here is on the outside of the rim. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull, we're going to try to do the valve last. So I'm going to turn the valve so that it's at the bottom. I'm going to pull back on the tire. Just kind of slide that guy in there. Need a little bit more soapy water. Don't hesitate to use some. This is where a set of tire levers would come in handy. Unfortunately, I have some at the cabin, but not here. So, using the screwdriver, we're going to be very, very careful. I'm not going to stick it in this way. I'm just going to stick it in between the rim here and kind of slide it. Just like this. You want to be very, very careful not to pinch the tube in there. Because if you do, you're going to be using some four-letter words and going back to the bike shop to go get a new one. So basically what I'm doing is I'm sliding my screwdriver along the groove and just twisting it ever so slightly. I'm not jamming it in here. I'm not using it as a wedge, nothing. Well, I am using it as a wedge, but I'm not using it as a pry bar or nothing really. I'm just, there we go. So, that's one side down. I'm just going to do the next side. Same kind of thing. Make sure that the valve stem is kind of like 90 degrees. So, if here's where it was, it's right here right now. That's where it is right there. So that what I can do is I can come up with a valve stem almost last. You don't want the valve stem to be the last because it'll be kind of hard to get in there. Same thing applies. It's actually kind of easy for the first little bit. So I turn this wheel around. There we go. The hardest part is when this section becomes straight like that. So what I'll do is the exact same technique. Slide, twist. Oops. Try not to get your screwdriver underneath the wheel or the tire like that. Very careful. Also make sure that the wheel's not sliding back on the other side. That's all. Now I got the tire on the wheel. Gonna pump it up. I can find the end of my hose somewhere. No, I'm not talking to you. The camera. Make sure that the valve is straight up and down. You don't get it jammed in there. Now for a road bike tire, you want to set the pressure. If you have two limits, you want to set the pressure to the closer to the upper limit, because it's designed for less rolling resistance. But if it's a mountain bike and you take it off road, then you're going to want to set it a little bit lower for that better grip. So, now that we got that guy fixed, we're just going to do the exact same thing. We're going to slide, but in reverse, we're going to slide this guy back down in there. Oh. It's caught on the brake. There we go. So now, we can adjust our thumb nut. Until it's relatively snug. Nope, not quite there yet. So make sure that this guy's in the loose position. So tighten that guy up by hand. Okay, now to set this thing so that we can basically pull it straight down. I'll put my body into this one. Obviously I got the thumb nut too tight. Now you want it so that it takes a decent amount of force to bend back so that your wheel doesn't end up coming off as you're running down the road. Now actually I should bring that so that's at the top. Okay, so now what you want to do is pull the brake caliper tight, set this guy down in there, and then, oops, wrong brake, squeeze the brake a couple times, give the wheel a spin. It's not too bad, but I think we should give it a quick adjustment. Okay, so in order to adjust a V-style caliper like this, what you need to do, squeeze the brake to center it. Now you notice how the one side moves more than the other. That means that this spring on this side needs to be tightened and the spring on this side needs to be loosened. Now if we look over here, this thing's actually almost all the way in. So it's not like you don't just make one tighter. You loosen one, then you make the other one tighter. And actually that one's actually really loose. Then squeeze the brakes again. Kind of have the opposite problem now actually. So try to get them kind of in an equilibrium state. So that they both move nicely. Now the other reason that this might bind is because this guy's jammed in here. Just be aware of that. But I think I'd be happy with that. Now if this brake still drags every once in a while because the wheel's not straight, then you're going to have to adjust these little guys right here. That's another project for another day. Now you know how to fix a bike tube. So now you don't have an excuse to not go out riding. Alright, thanks for watching. Take it easy everybody. If you got any requests, please shout them out and I'll do it if I can get to it or get around to it. Alright, see you everybody.